one of the veterans and symbols of business aviation, loved by pilots and passengers around the world, and a true French classic. And like any French classic, it cannot be like anyone else. Hello aviators, Sky here, and today we will ride on a beauty, play in the cockpit, sit in a luxury cabin, and try to understand why in the 21st century a small plane needs 3 engines. Before us is the Dassault Falcon 900. The Falcon 900, being the brainchild of an old and eminent company, was the result of a long evolution of a family that is already nearly 60 years old. The family was born in the era of the rise of jet business aviation. Among the newborn Gulfstreams, Hawkers and Learjets, the Falcon 20 took to the skies. Like many of its relatives, it had 2 engines, becoming the forefather of the Dassault line of twin-engine aircraft. However, in the mid-1970s, aviators had to give the 20s better performance in terms of weight and range, and what's equally important, the ability to fly across oceans, overcoming the strict restrictions of that time. The most logical solution to this problem was to create a 3-engine aircraft very close to the base, which was the Falcon 50, the father of the Dassault Trijets line. The Falcon 50 was for its time an excellent aircraft. Economical, efficient, comfortable and reliable. With a weight of 18 tons, it flew at a distance of up to 5,700 kilometers, on a cruise speed of about 900 kilometers per hour. For the 1970s, this was an excellent result that held up well for several decades. However, the evolutionary nature of the family provided not only optimality of solutions, but also limits. One of the main obstacles for the Falcon 50 was the fuselage, similar to the Falcon 20. Narrow, low, and not particularly roomy, only 9 people. This was not bad for its class of medium-sized business jets, but further increases in capacity and range made it economically ineffective, and even worse for a business jet, uncomfortable. But competitors were not sitting idle, offering ever larger and longer range vehicles. It was obvious that it was necessary to make a new aircraft, which, although conceptually would remain the heir to the 50, but would be seriously changed. They began solving this problem already in the early 1980s. The word "more" can be called a slogan of the project. More interior space, more comfort, more range, more speed. The project, called Mystère 900 or Falcon 900, was announced at the Paris Air Show in 1983. The aircraft was created quite quickly. Already in 1984, the prototype made its maiden flight, and by 1986 it was certified, first by the French Directorate General for Civil Aviation, and a week later by the US Federal Aviation Administration. The sky was open now. The Falcon 900 was a big breakthrough for Dassault. The plane could fly 7,000 kilometers and was much more spacious and comfortable than the Model 50, which allowed it to take on its advanced competitors quite well. More than 100 basic aircraft were delivered until the early 1990s, after which they became known as the 900A version. They did so because the 900B version appeared, which received minor improvements to engines and avionics, increased range, and a reinforced landing gear to work with short or even unpaved runways. A few years later, the B version underwent another modernization, receiving a new Honeywell Primus 2000 avionics system, plus an increase in fuel. This is how the Falcon 900EX was born. Next came the Falcon 900C, which was basically the EX version but without the range increase, in fact, a direct replacement for the B version. The beginning of the 21st century was greeted by Dassault with a big step in improving avionics, and the appearance of the Easy Flight system, which we will look at later. The 900EX and 900C versions underwent modernizations. The first received the Easy postscript, and the second began to be called DX Easy. We also shouldn't forget about the military version. The Falcon 900 MPA was made on the basis of the Falcon 900DX and is a maritime patrol aircraft that received search and observation equipment, as well as weapons. A pair of light torpedoes, or a pair of Exocet anti-ship missiles. The final version of the 900 model at the moment is the Falcon 900 LX, born in 2010, and this is the one we'll take a closer look at. So, standing before us is the Dassault Falcon 900 LX, length 20.21 meters, wingspan 21.38 meters, height 7.67 meters. The overall layout is classic Dassault, a low swept-wing aircraft, a cruciform tail unit, and of course 3 engines in the tail. Very beautiful. When creating the Falcon 900, engineers used all the developments available at that time, and Dassault quite possibly had the most of them. That's right, I will note that the company has more experience in aircraft design than its competitors, and not only because of its age, but also because it works not only in business aviation, but also in other areas, including the military. The result of their work was an extremely efficient design, with excellent aerodynamics and weight, which was achieved, among other things, by the widespread use of composites in the 1980s. The Falcon 900 LX, being a large aircraft for its class, turned out to be quite light. Empty weight 14 tons, maximum takeoff 22.2 tons. Sometimes it even becomes difficult to compare it with colleagues, which, with seemingly similar performance, can turn out to be much heavier. Considering that one of the emphasized features of Falcon aircraft is the ability to operate in difficult conditions and on short runways, this issue was dealt with especially carefully. This is noticeable in the design of the aircraft's wing, which has a slight curve in the leading edge, improving airflow, as well as highly developed high-lift devices, huge slats, no less huge double-slotted flaps, 2 sections on each console, large ailerons and spoilers, 4 panels on each console. Also, with the development of the aircraft, large wingtips began to be installed, similar to the shocklets from the Airbus A350. Thanks to this, the aircraft is capable of maintaining not only high altitudes and cruise speeds, but also quite decent minimum speeds. The 900 LX has a landing speed of approximately 110 knots, takeoff run of 1,633 meters, and landing roll of only 736 meters. The plane sits low, but has a fairly powerful landing gear. Again, you never know where you might land. Each leg received 2 wheels. The front rotating one is smaller, the main gears are larger. As the Falcon 900 developed, it changed engine versions, but the base was always the same: 3 Honeywell TFE731 turbofan engines. This engine is already a classic. Created back in the 1970s, it took the first business jets into the sky, and over time became the fiery heart of many light jets. To date, more than 11,000 of them have been delivered. The Falcon 900 LX has the TFE731-60 version, with 22.25 kilonewtons of thrust. 3 engines are located in the rear part of the fuselage, 2 on the sides, the third inside the tail, with an air intake located in front of the fin. The aircraft's thrust reverser is installed only on the central engine. 2 large buckets do their job quite well. Auxiliary power unit, the Honeywell GTCP36-150, is also located in the tail section, under the central engine across the fuselage axis. The air intake is at the bottom right, behind the protective grille, and the exhaust is also there, a little higher. This power plant, coupled with the aerodynamics of the airframe, provides good flight performance. The aircraft is capable of flying at altitudes up to 15,545 meters, at speeds up to Mach 0.87, about 510 knots. Flight range with 8 passengers, 8,800 kilometers. Enough to fly from London to Seattle or Mumbai. Of course, the sight of all this beauty suggests the main philosophical question of modern aviation. A 3-engine design, like the Boeing 727, Tu-154 and Hawker Trident. Aircraft from the 1960s, which for the most part are museum exhibits. And the French not only continue to produce Trijets, but also create new ones, the only ones in the world. Why? Well, first of all, they are the French. I know, deep technical analysis. Secondly, there are advantages, oddly enough, in the economy. At first glance, this seems absurd. 2 engines are better than 3, right? Well, Dassault did not agree with this. The Trijet design allows for more compact and lightweight engines. Look at the TFE 731. This is a small motor, and 3 of them, one of which is also inside the fuselage, create noticeably less air resistance in flight. Another noticeable little thing is mass. Let me note that an aircraft engine is a very dense and complex mechanism, made of heat-resistant and often very heavy materials. The TFE 731, depending on the version, weighs on average 350 to 400 kilograms. Let's look at the 900's peer, the Gulfstream 4. Its Rolls-Royce Tay 611 engine weighs 1.5 tons. And this is not a Galaxy. Here a couple of tons is a lot, and they can be used, for example, to increase the fuel reserve, and therefore the range, or to increase the payload. The reason for this difference, of course, is power. If you compare the planes, you will notice that the power plants of twin-engine aircraft are noticeably more powerful than those of Trijets. One might wonder, can't they just use something lighter? No, they can't. This is already a safety issue. For example, if the engine of a conventional twin-engine aircraft fails on takeoff, this will lead to a loss of half of its thrust, which means that the second one must be powerful enough to pull the plane. If the same thing happens to a Trijet, this will lead to the loss of 1/3 of the thrust, which means that the maximum thrust can be made lower. Meanwhile, the maximum thrusts themselves are used only on takeoff or in such extreme situations. But in a cruise flight, that is, on most of the routes, such thrusts are not needed, and it turns out that the Falcons fly at more optimal modes, while their competitors are carrying excess thrust. Another safety issue is ETOPS. Twin-engine aircraft must fly in such a way that in the event of a failure, they can fly to an alternate airfield on one engine. These restrictions are now much softer than they were before, but the fact remains that Trijets do not have them in principle, which gives some bonuses in terms of flexibility in creating routes. In terms of purchase and maintenance economy, the situation is similar. On the one hand, 3 engines should be more expensive and more difficult to repair, but the TFE 731 makes up for this with its simplicity and quantity. There is an insane amount of them, which makes working with them much easier. There are many other bonuses to this scheme. Better throttle response, better performance when working with short runways and in hot and high airport conditions. The Falcon flies to places where its colleagues would be afraid to go. And there is in fact a huge number of such nuances, which for decades have been the root of many disputes and discussions. From such a description, the question may arise: if Trijets are so good, why don't we see crowds of aircraft manufacturers rushing to make similar business jets, or remakes of the Boeing 727? Because these advantages are not so significant. The Dassault Trijets competing in the large market, thanks to their features, in a sense, created their own niche, which they have occupied for decades. For the creators of classic twin-engine jets, switching to such a design would be difficult and expensive, and the potential demand simply would not justify it. Even Dassault, I note, makes not only 3-engine aircraft but also twin-engine ones. In large commercial aviation, these advantages practically disappear, and from Trijets only veterans fly now, for which obviously no heirs will be created. One of the main tasks set before the engineers when created the Falcon 900 was to increase the level of comfort and capacity compared to the cramped Falcon 50. This task was solved in the most obvious way, by enlarging the fuselage. Thanks to this, the new aircraft received a much more spacious cabin, 10.11 meters long, 2.34 meters wide, 1.88 meters high. A lot more room than in the 50th, which was 8 centimeters lower and as much as 49 centimeters narrower. The cabin volume reached 35.8 cubic meters. Capacity 14 passengers, with some effort up to 16. The Falcon 50 had 9. Cabin configurations vary depending on customer requirements, but in the base they are quite familiar for business jets of this class. In the front part, near the entrance to the plane, there is a lavatory, several lockers, and of course a galley. Microwave, refrigerator, coffee machine, a complete set. There was no room for the flight attendant's seat here, and it was placed in the cockpit behind the co-pilot's seat. Next comes the main cabin. It is divided into 3 zones. In front, there is a large area in which there are 4 seats, in pairs on each side of the aisle. Next is a conference group of 4 seats with one large table on one side of the aisle, as well as a soft-top credenza on the other. The second large zone, separated by a wall, is a relaxation area, where there is a pair of large sofas opposite each other, which can be converted into a bed. The third zone is the passenger lavatory. There is also space behind it, a 3.6 cubic meters luggage compartment in the rear, with access both from the cabin through the door in the lavatory and from outside through a large door on the left side of the fuselage. The interior equipment is at a quite decent level. Materials: metal, wood, leather, and top fabrics. The seats have mechanisms that allow you to turn and recline the backrest. LED lighting is adaptive and can imitate natural light at different times of the day, reducing the impact of jet lag. The air conditioning system provides active air filtration and pressure corresponding to an altitude of about 2,000 meters in cruise flight, when there may be 15 kilometers of sky and clouds under the aircraft's belly. The rest of the equipment, multimedia, TVs, satellite communications, internet, everything is in place. The windows are quite large, which is always great. The Falcon 900LX cockpit is equipped with the Easy 2, an updated version of the Easy enhanced avionics system, based on the Honeywell Primus Epic core. Interestingly, when creating avionics for its business jets, Dassault actively uses its military developments. The Rafale fighting jet sends its regards. There are not many of them on the 900 model, but there are more on the new planes. So, what do we have here? 4 huge multifunction displays, a couple of tablets on the sides, cursors controlled by trackballs, head-up displays, and onboard computers that duplicate each other. Plus, the aircraft received the advanced Falcon Eye system, a set of multifunctional optical systems that allow you to fly day and night in almost any weather conditions. There are large, full-fledged yokes here, no side sticks. The cockpit looks great, although in some places, of course, signs of age are showing. The ceiling is full of circuit breakers, and the frontal glazing of the cockpit doesn't appear particularly modern, especially looking at new generation jets, which are outer space in comparison. The Falcon 900 has become one of Dassault's most successful business jets. Born back in the mid-1980s, it successfully developed and stood against competitors' aircraft for 4 decades, winning the love of aviators and passengers around the world. They are operated in dozens of countries, and the special performance of the Falcons has made them popular not only among private clients and commercial business aviation operators, but also among various government and military structures. Officials love them very much. At the moment, more than 500 of them have already been produced, and these things can cost up to $40 to $50 million. But nothing lasts forever. Despite the fact that the company continues deliveries, now it is already obvious that it is increasingly difficult for a veteran to fight for a market in conditions when competitors are taking to the skies new generations of business jets. Of course, Dassault is not going to give its piece of the pie to anyone, and is also creating new machines. Among the classic Trijets, successors of the 900, there is a pair of the newest Falcon 7X and 8X. But we'll talk about them another time. That's all for today. Like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to watch the videos early, see some exclusive behind-the-scenes content, or just support the channel, consider joining our Patreon community. Luxurious flights and soft landings to you.